They called themselves the Ciliari Dominion. For 5,000 years, their fleets had roamed the darkness between stars, imposing order with the tip of a spear and the promise of annihilation. No civilization, however defiant, had ever withstood the relentless advance of their empire. Even the oldest records of the Galactic Concord showed the same pattern repeating. A Ciliari delegation arriving under the pretense of diplomacy, delivering threats wrapped in polite ritual, and departing once the terms of surrender had been signed in a haze of fear and pragmatism. That was the way it had always been, until they came to Earth. The first human delegation had been small, a handful of statesmen, linguists, and cultural envoys, led by Ambassador Ilana Reyes, a woman known not only for her silver tongue, but for the iron principles beneath it. She had stood in the Hall of Concord before hundreds of alien dignitaries and declared that humanity would not be bullied. There was a quiet strength in her that even the Ciliari respected, though they would never admit it aloud. When the Ciliari flagship entered orbit above Earth, it blotted out a quarter of the stars. The vessel was a vast obsidian dagger, bristling with weapons older than most species. It moved with the grace of a predator that had never been challenged. Their commander, High Marshal Vecranus, sent a single transmission: submit to vassalage or suffer eradication. The Dominion's archives described humans as resourceful but ultimately fractured, tribal species who would choose survival over pride. They never anticipated that Ambassador Reyes would look into the unblinking lens of their transmission, array and respond with a single sentence: humanity will not bow. For 3 days, Earth waited in tense silence. The Ciliari made no reply, no demands, no clarifications. Only that silence, stretching out across every frequency like the hush before a storm. Then, without warning, a smaller Ciliari vessel detached from the flagship and descended to the United Nations landing platform in Geneva. There was no ceremony when the hatch opened. No diplomatic overture. Only a black container, tall as a man, rimmed with cold metal seals and the Dominion's sigils of conquest. It was a young technician, barely 20 years old, who stepped forward and keyed the release. Later, he would never quite remember how his hands kept from shaking as the lid folded back. All he recalled was the moment when the light struck the object inside, a collection of scorched remains, each piece meticulously labeled in the Ciliari's angular script. Human tissue, fabric, a single golden necklace, the one Ilana Reyes never removed. A simple note was pinned to the inside of the container: "This is your answer." The world stopped. In that hour, every illusion of safety humanity had clung to, every hope that diplomacy could avert what came next, crumbled. The footage was broadcast to every settlement in the Sol system. Millions watched in stunned horror as the camera zoomed in on the Ciliari seal affixed to the remains. Even the most cynical voices, the ones who had always counseled caution, fell silent. Humanity had been many things in its short, turbulent history: reckless, divided, brilliant, cruel, compassionate. But it had never been known for forgiveness when one of its own was butchered and displayed as a trophy. The Ciliari believed that their demonstration would force Earth to capitulate, that the fear in every human heart would eclipse all other sentiments. In 1,000 prior conquests, this tactic had always worked. Yet they had never faced a species that had clawed its way from extinction more than once, that had endured plague and war and still found the strength to rebuild. In hidden bunkers beneath old mountain ranges, Earth's defense councils convened. Without hesitation, generals whose names the Ciliari would never know signed orders that had been prepared decades before. Orbital relays whispered coded phrases into the void: Condition Omega. Initiate Revenant protocols. Unlock Atlas contingency. On Earth, there was no riot, no mass panic. Instead, a vast cold clarity settled over billions of minds at once. The last threshold had been crossed, while the Ciliari High Command congratulated themselves in the sterile corridors of their dreadnought, believing they had proven their superiority beyond question. The first of Earth's deep-range scout vessels slipped past their picket lines unnoticed. On Luna, railgun platforms that had been disguised as research stations pivoted silently toward the stars. In distant asteroid belts, hibernating drone swarms stirred to life, their targeting matrices warming in the moment when the Celiari believed they had extinguished all resistance. They had instead kindled a fury they could never understand, and, though the Dominion's envoys smirked in their war rooms, convinced that no human fleet could challenge their armadas, a single voice spoke into the hush of Earth's command chamber. It was Admiral Chun, a man known neither for sentiment nor hyperbole, who broke the quiet. "They think we are afraid," he said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the chamber. "They think we will cower as so many others have." His eyes rose to the live projection of the Celiari fleet drifting above Earth's pale blue atmosphere. "They have made the gravest mistake any conqueror can make," he whispered. "They have mistaken our patience for weakness." The Celiari fleet moved with glacial inevitability. In the cold dark beyond Earth's orbit, their warships adjusted formation in silent unison, a shifting lattice of armor and annihilation. For centuries, this display had been enough to break the spirit of lesser civilizations. There was a psychological calculus behind it, a doctrine refined over millennia. Show them the depthless scale of your power, and they will surrender before. A single shot is fired, but as the hours ticked past, the expected signals of submission never came. No transmissions of capitulation, no offers to negotiate a partial surrender, not even a single plea for mercy. Instead, Earth remained eerily quiet, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, from his command dais aboard the Dominion flagship. Desolation of empires. High Marshal Vikernes studied the tactical displays with a reptilian patience. Rows of subordinate officers shifted nervously around him, their scales pulsing faint blue. The Marshal's own colors remained a steady, confident gold. "Any new transmissions?" he asked. "None, High Marshal," replied a Coms officer, antennae quivering. "They are ignoring our ultimatums." A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge. To the Celiari, it was the final confirmation of human desperation. Silence, after all, was the last refuge of the defeated. On the surface, the Celiari assumptions seemed sound. Planetary scans revealed no evidence of a fleet massing for counterattack. Civilian transport channels flickered with the expected chaos evacuation notices, cries for aid, broadcasts of grief and outrage. It all aligned perfectly with the Dominion's experience. Terror had paralyzed the prey, yet buried among the mud. Chatter unnoticed by Celiari analysts were patterns that did not belong. Strange code fragments, transmissions that never repeated, packets of data that didn't match any known encryption. A few junior officers flagged the anomalies for review, but their reports were dismissed. Humans, after all, were clever and small. Ways skilled at sabotage, infiltration, nuisance tactics, but they were incapable of grand strategic deception. Or so the Dominion believed. Beyond the veil of apparent panic, Earth's true preparations unfolded in silence. On the far side of Luna, vast hangars opened like the petals of a steel flower, releasing black-winged drones by the thousands. The ships bore no markings, their hulls grown from carbon nanolattices designed to absorb and scatter every scanning pulse. For decades, they had waited dormant, hidden beneath layers of camouflage so advanced no known sensor array could pierce it. In low orbit, Celiari reconnaissance corvettes dutifully recorded the expected exodus of refugees. Hundreds of vessels departed Earth's atmosphere in staggered convoys, each one broadcasting identification codes, flight plans, and emergency status updates. The Dominion's fleet commander noted their departure and made a curt annotation. Civilian transports were not a threat, but if any Celiari had been patient enough to track those convoys to the edge of the system, they might have noticed that not a single ship continued along the registered vector. Instead, each convoy dispersed into meticulously plotted routes, scattering across asteroid belts, dark comets, and forgotten mining colonies. Hidden in their cargo bays, weapons and supplies meant for a war no Celiari believed was possible. High. Marshal Vecrinus remained fixed before the great viewport, watching Earth slowly turn beneath his ship. Somewhere in those swirling clouds, he knew, lay the embers of defiance. He had seen it before, the last flicker of resistance that preceded surrender. It was a pattern he trusted more than any algorithm. Yet as he pondered his next move, a fresh report arrived that drew a faint line of unease across his brow. "High Marshal," the sensor officer said carefully, "we have an anomalous signal from the outer rim of the system. A human freighter drifting without power. It appears deliberately abandoned." Vecrinus gestured languidly. "Dispatch a boarding team. Bring back anything of value. This is likely an attempt to lure us away from orbit." The corvette Faithless Edge approached the derelict freighter an hour later. Celiari Marines in black carapace armor forced entry through the aft airlock. Their helmet cameras streamed live footage, narrow corridors, scattered crates, no life signs. Then in the darkened hold, they found it a holographic projector pulsing with blue light. "Commander," a Marine reported, "there is a message." "Here, shall we transmit it?" "Proceed," Vecrinus ordered. The hologram flickered to life, revealing the face of a human. He was older, hair iron gray, eyes unblinking. The voice that followed was calm, far too calm, to the Celiari Dominion. It began, "You have made yourselves clear. Now so must we." In the moment before the transmission cut off, the figure leaned forward, and his final words echoed across the bridge. "We are coming." Then the freighter erupted in a blossom of white fire. Even at a safe distance, the Faithless Edge shuddered under the blast wave. When the glare faded, nothing remained but drifting shards of hull. Silence reclaimed the bridge of the desolation of empires. It lasted a heartbeat too long. Long enough for every officer present to feel it, something they could not name, but which no Celiari had ever experienced in the opening act of conquest. A prickling sense that the script was not unfolding as it should. Vecrinus exhaled, and his golden scales dulled by a fraction. "Begin full spectrum scans," he commanded. "Search for any other irregularities. Humans are resourceful. They will try every petty defiance before the end." But as the Dominion's fleets spread their nets ever wider, they failed to see the deeper pattern taking shape, one that no species in the galaxy had ever survived unscathed. For in that moment, while the Celiari congratulated themselves on their inevitable triumph, a quiet understanding was spreading across humanity. This war would be the last time anyone underestimated Earth. Asterisk in the deep stillness between planets. The Celiari recon frigate Silent Vector coasted along its patrol route, sensors sweeping endlessly for anything that might disturb the illusion of their total control. Its captain, Relthak, considered the assignment beneath his station a futile precaution to satisfy the High Marshal's curiosity. Humans were improvisational pests, true, but nothing they'd done yet had proven worthy of real alarm. At precisely 4 o'clock Terran Standard Time, the Silent Vector passed within 1,000 kilometers of an unremarkable asteroid, known only by a mining designation, 47 Kappa. For decades it had been a dead rock, used for occasional drills and ore sampling. The Dominion's archives listed it as devoid of atmosphere, resources, or tactical significance. So when Relthak's instruments registered a faint tremor, a subsonic vibration deep within the asteroid's crust, he frowned but did not immediately react. Minor tectonic shifts were common in rubble fields. He was about to dismiss the reading when a second tremor shivered through the deck plates, and then a third, faster and stronger. He leaned forward, mandibles tensing. "Bring all arrays to full resolution," he ordered, voice suddenly clipped. "I want internal scans of that rock." The sensor feed sharpened. peeling back layer upon layer of dense nickel-iron strata. In the pit of Relthak's stomach, a cold realization began to uncoil. There was something inside. Something massive. Before he could issue a warning, the asteroid split apart with a force that knocked every Ciliari officer from their seats. Monolithic slabs of rock tumbled away, revealing a colossal shape beneath the ship. Angular and matte black, its hull etched with glyphs no alien database could translate. Humanity had called it Acheron. Its design had never appeared in any intelligence briefing. No known shipyards admitted to constructing it. It was an impossibility made real. A vessel the size of a Dominion dreadnought, but built in secret. Buried in an unremarkable asteroid until the hour it was needed. Relthak felt the first pang of real fear as Acheron powered up. Banks of engine nozzles came alive in ghostly blue, propelling the behemoth forward with silent purpose. Across its hull, thousands of tiny hatches irised open, releasing clouds of drones that scattered like swarming insects. "This is Silent Vector," Relthak shouted over the com. "We have a human Super Heavy warship." Repeat. A Super Heavy warship emerging from asteroid 47 Kappa. Request immediate reinforcement. On the Dominion flagship, High Marshal Vikernes received the transmission in cold disbelief. He studied the grainy feed, the impossible ship splitting the asteroid shell, the expanding halo of combat drones. Even across the void, he could sense the audacity in the design. This was no last-ditch effort. This was a calculated maneuver. Decades in the making, his officers shifted uneasily, trading glances that betrayed their unease. "Redirect 3 capital ships to intercept," Vikernes commanded. "Crush it before it." His words cut off as the first weapons fired. Acheron's main batteries were not the conventional mass drivers or plasma beams the Ciliari expected. They were something else entirely unfamiliar, lattice barrels that glowed a dull crimson as they discharged. The beams struck the Silent Vector amidships, and for a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, the Ciliari frigate simply came apart. No explosion. No secondary detonations. Every bond at the molecular level failed in an instant, the entire hull collapsing into a drifting cloud of metallic dust. The Dominion bridge went deathly silent. What in the black abyss did they fire? Hissed an aide. No one answered. Vikernes' gaze locked on the swirling wreckage. He felt it then, a shiver that passed through every veteran instinct he had. The humans had not only concealed a ship this size, they had armed it with technology the Dominion could not immediately decipher, much less counter. The reality struck with pitiless clarity. The humans had been preparing for this war since before first contact. Even as Ciliari reinforcements accelerated toward Acheron, the ship continued its advance, leisurely, as though the Dominion fleet were an afterthought. From the command deck, Admiral Chun watched the tactical display update with each passing second. Dozens of Ciliari warships were repositioning to form a blockade. Their confidence was evident in the crisp, predatory arcs they traced across the holographic sphere. Chun's expression did not change. He simply lifted a hand and pointed to the heart of the formation. "There," he said to his weapons officer. "Let's see if they have the stomach for a real fight." With that single command, Acheron's forward batteries aligned as one, a lance of shimmering crimson coalescing in the void. Ciliari targeting sensors flared warning icons, but it was already too late. The second volley tore through the Dominion's lead cruiser like it was tissue. The ship's shields didn't even flicker. In less than 2 seconds, half of the cruiser was vaporized, and the rest tumbled away in molten fragments. On every Ciliari channel, alarm klaxons shrieked. VCRA, in his single quotes, hands clenched the edge of his command dais. All around him, his subordinates spoke in strained, frantic voices, the veneer of composure unraveling. This was not the opening engagement he had envisioned. It was not a clean demonstration of overwhelming superiority. It was a Humiliation live and undeniable. And the human ship was still advancing. In that moment, High Marshal Vecranus understood the first sliver of truth. They had not merely underestimated Earth, they had awakened something older and more dangerous than fear. Something that had waited in the dark, patient and implacable. A hunger to prove, once and for all, that no empire could stand unchallenged. The Dominion Armada regrouped with mechanical precision. Around the drifting wreckage of their shattered cruiser, Ciliari warships locked into a sphere of overlapping fire arcs, a formation honed over centuries of unchallenged conquest. To the High Marshal, it was a familiar strategy: encircle, isolate, annihilate. No foe had ever escaped it intact. On the bridge of the desolation of empires, Vecranus watched the tactical display flicker with threat indicators, each tagged in cold. Green runes, target acquisition, targeting lock, projected kill zone. The humans had dared to reveal their hidden dreadnought, but now, the Dominion's numbers would close around them like a fist. Full saturation bombardment, he ordered, voice low and certain. They will learn the price of their defiance. He did not notice, none of them noticed, that in the shadowed command center aboard Acheron, Admiral Chun was studying their encirclement with the detached curiosity of a surgeon. Observing a failed operation, Chun touched the holographic interface, and a separate layer of data overlaid the Dominion formation, dozens of bright pinpoints winking in a pattern the Ciliari could not see. Every ship in that proud blockade had been marked for months, back when the first Ciliari envoys came in peace. When they traded hyperlenses for Terran ores and analyzed Earth's orbital paths, the Dominion had been unaware that they were also offering humanity the perfect cover. Under the guise of trade, the Ciliari had invited Earth's reconnaissance probes aboard their vessels, innocuous engineering tools the Dominion never bothered to dismantle. Those probes had seated microdrones in every hull, and for years they had lain dormant, gathering telemetry, cataloging weaknesses, mapping structural nodes. Now, at Chun's silent signal, they woke. Aboard the Ciliari destroyer Perfect Axiom, the weapons chief was moments from initiating primary bombardment when the lights failed. Systems across the ship flickered, screens spasming in random code. Crew shouted in confusion as entire decks went dark. One heartbeat later, emergency illumination returned, just in time to show every weapons capacitor reading offline. On 3 other warships, reactors spiked into redline overload. Antimatter containment alarms howled as microdrone sabotage routines tripped failsafes in perfect sequence. Engineers scrambled, trying to override commands that did not exist in any known Ciliari protocol. For the first time in 1,000 years, Dominion vessels had been hacked from the inside. In the hush before the catastrophe, Vecranus watched in disbelief as ships winked off his tactical grid, not from enemy fire, but from the simple precision of sabotage. It was impossible. Humans were not supposed to be capable of infiltration at this scale. Their science was decades behind the Dominions, but the evidence unfolded before him in brutal clarity. Half the encirclement crumbled, burning and drifting. Acheron glided forward, its engines unhurried, as if daring any survivors to challenge it. On the bridge of Acheron, Chun's expression did not change, though a faint glimmer of something like satisfaction lit his eyes. "Mark the remaining ships," he said. "We'll do this clean." The gunnery teams obeyed, coordinating their fire through the autonomous targeting arrays. The dreadnought's second volley was a slow-motion execution, each beam shearing clean through a hull segment, critical to maneuvering or power. No wasted shots, no bluster. Only methodical dismemberment. Vecranus tried to rally his fleet, but panic had begun to metastasize in the ranks. Officers barked contradictory orders across channels fouled with static. The Dominion had not trained for this, a war in which the enemy did not merely resist, but outmaneuvered them at every turn. And across every sensor relay, The same broadcast repeated on a loop. You returned our ambassador in pieces. You thought we would kneel. You thought wrong. In the first hours of the campaign, the Ciliari had killed Ilana Reyes to set an example. But the only lesson humanity had taken was that no measure would be spared in response. Aboard the Ciliari Dreadnought Vault of Conquest, Commander Sitha pressed her clawed hand to her chest, struggling to control her ragged breathing. On her displays, she could see escape pods ejecting from crippled warships, their beacons flickering weakly. It had not been this way on the other worlds they subjugated. Even the proudest species eventually broke when the Dominion unleashed its wrath. Yet the humans did not merely resist, they struck with a precision that mocked the Dominion's arrogance. And still the nightmare continued. On Luna, railgun platforms that had pretended to be scientific outposts fired in coordinated salvos. Hypervelocity slugs sliced through the remaining blockade ships before their shields could fully cycle. Each impact was an act of vengeance measured in kilometers per second. Vacranus felt the certainty he had carried all his life waver. Then, fracture. It was the voice of one of his surviving captains that finally spoke aloud what no Ciliari had dared admit. High Marshal, we are being outmatched. Silence answered him, and in that silence, the Ciliari realized their greatest failing. They had prepared for conquest, for intimidation, for compliance, but they had never prepared for a foe that had decided nothing mattered except retribution. Acheron turned slowly, aligning itself with the flagship. Admiral Chun stood before the viewport, hands folded behind his back, and spoke the only words the Ciliari command channel would receive in that moment. Your time is over. On every Dominion bridge, the words fell like a sentence passed down from something far older and more relentless than their empire. Asterisk, the Dominion's fractured fleet limped through the black, each remaining vessel trailing scars of humiliation, whole sections burned out, reactors trembling on the brink of collapse. On the flagship Desolation of Empires, the bridge had gone tomb quiet. No one dared look directly at High Marshal Vecranus, whose mandibles twitched with the effort of restraining raw fury. For a moment he simply stared into the tactical hologram, watching the inexorable crawl of the human dreadnought across the void. The ship was not even trying to maneuver evasively. It advanced in a perfectly straight line, as though no force in the galaxy could inconvenience it. Bring the reserve squadrons forward, he rasped. All of them. A subordinate hesitated. High Marshal, those are planetary defense forces. If we commit them here, the rimward colonies, damn the colonies, Vecranus snarled. This is no longer a demonstration of force. This is survival. The order transmitted in a flurry of encrypted bursts, summoning hundreds of reserve ships from hidden staging points. Light cruisers, carrier barges, swarms of interceptors, everything the Dominion had not bothered to commit in the first wave. Assuming the humans too primitive to warrant total engagement, thought it was a force vast enough to smother continents. Enough to scour entire civilizations from the face of their worlds. But even as the Armada surged to rendezvous, Admiral Chun watched with the faintest lift to one eyebrow. He had expected them to call everything forward. After all, the Dominion still believed overwhelming numbers could drown any threat. He was counting on it. On Luna, 1,000 kilometers below, the hidden bunkers buried beneath Shackleton Crater came alive with coded transmissions. Earth's Defense Command had known this day would come, perhaps not the exact hour or the exact provocations, but the shape of it had been etched into contingency plans since the first Ciliari emissaries stepped onto Terran soil. In those days, the Ciliari had smiled and spoken of mutual prosperity, of guiding humanity to its proper place. Even then, the diplomats had understood what their generosity truly meant. Subservience dressed in honeyed words. So Earth had smiled back, agreed, traded, learned. All the while, it built contingency plans no conqueror could imagine. And now, across the battered surface of the moon, Ancient silos opened hulking doors, splitting to reveal payloads so secret that only a handful of human leaders had ever seen them. Project Thanatos, born in the last century of Earth's self-destruction, perfected in orbit where no treaties reached, it was never meant merely to defend. It was an extinction-level deterrent, an unthinkable threat in human hands. But Alana Reyes had believed to her last breath that someday, something out there would force humanity to finish what it began. And so, in her memory, the safeguards fell away, 74 kinetic rods, each the size of a skyscraper, detached. From their cradles, no explosives, no warheads. Just tungsten, moving faster than thought. On the Dominion scanners, the launch appeared first as a bloom of unexpected sensor ghosts, cold objects tumbling free of Luna. The Ciliari observers spent precious seconds trying to reconcile the readings. Then the rods ignited their descent. Thrusters. Vakranus saw them at last on his display. Countless tiny motes arcing toward the converging Dominion fleet. Point defense batteries, he bellowed. Destroy them before they... He never finished the order. The first rod struck a cruiser amidships. From a distance, it looked almost harmless, a glinting silver line that pierced the ship cleanly from bow to stern. Then came the impact shock. A kinetic rod traveling at orbital velocity carried more energy than a nuclear warhead. The cruiser detonated in a blossom of incandescent plasma, hull sections vaporized by the instant heat. The second rod punched through a carrier, splitting it like a ripe fruit. In less than 12 seconds, 20 ships ceased to exist. Admiral Chun did not blink. His voice was measured, almost gentle as he addressed the Ciliari command frequencies. You returned our ambassador in pieces, he said. Now you understand the true cost of that cruelty. In that moment, watching their proud armada die, faster than they could scream, the Dominion realized their second, deeper mistake. They had not simply underestimated humanity's military ingenuity. They had underestimated their collective memory, because humans remembered every betrayal, every genocide. Every time some stronger power thought them too primitive to resist, the last kinetic rod struck the vault of conquest, the most decorated warship in Ciliari history. It fell from orbit like a judgment. When the flash faded, nothing remained but drifting slag. On the Dominion flagship, silence took on a strangled, suffocating quality. One of Vakranus's lieutenants, young, trembling, whispered what no officer had ever dared speak aloud. They are monsters. Shun heard it over the open channel. His face remained impassive. No, he replied. We are simply human. His gaze swept the tactical map, where the Dominion fleet had become a field of broken signals. The surviving Ciliari formations began to scatter, fracturing in terror. Squadrons fled on divergent vectors, discipline dissolved by the knowledge that no doctrine prepared them to fight an enemy willing to bring extinction-level weapons to bear without hesitation. In that moment, they understood the last, most terrible twist. They had provoked a war that would not stop until humanity's retribution was complete. The darkness beyond Luna had never seemed so vast. What remained of the Dominion fleet was a shattered constellation, hundreds of wrecked hulls spinning slowly in the void. Burning gases vented into space. Molten fragments glimmered like dying stars. On the bridge of the desolation of empires, the atmosphere had curdled into despair. Officers who once barked orders with unshakable confidence now huddled at their stations, eyes glazed, too afraid to meet their high marshal's gaze. Vakranus stared out through the forward viewport, his mandibles locked in a rictus of disbelief. In the cold black, the human dreadnought Acheron glided forward, immense and silent. It did not slow. Every sensor remained locked on the flagship. High Marshal, croaked one of his senior strategists, voice wrecked by smoke and panic. We must withdraw. We cannot. Vakranus spun and struck him across the throat, hard enough to send the strategist sprawling. Cowards, he snarled, every syllable burning. We are the Dominion. We do not run. But even as he spoke, he knew the words were hollow. The legend of the Dominion, the myth of unstoppable conquest, had died the moment the first kinetic rods fell from the sky. The humans had revealed something older than tactics, older than weapons. Resolve that no species Vacranus had subjugated had ever shown it in such raw, pitiless measure. A chime pulsed at the periphery of the tactical display. A Dominion destroyer, Pale Scythe, was vectoring in from the flank, desperate to shield the flagship. Its captain broadcast a frantic plea. "High Marshal, we will screen you. Fall back to the rally point." The com cut to static. A beam of dull red light punched through the destroyer's core, slicing it in half as cleanly as a butcher's blade. Vacranus. Knuckles whitened on the railing. Outside the viewport, Acheron rotated a fraction of a degree, aligning its main batteries with his command deck. A voice rose across all channels. "The final broadcast of Admiral Chun. This is for Ilana Reyes," he said. "This is for every warning you ignored." For a moment, Vacranus tasted something he had never known. Pure, perfect fear. Then the world vanished in a spear of crimson brilliance. The flagship ruptured in silence, the prow splitting away from the keel's atmosphere, vaporized in a single convulsive blast. Chunks of armored plating tumbled free, glowing white. Hot. No orders came from the Dominion command after that. Their surviving ships broke formation entirely. Dozens surged toward the outer system, fleeing for any jump vector that might carry them away from Earth. Others simply went dark, surrendering to the paralysis of defeat. Yet Acheron did not pursue them. It moved through the battlefield like a shark through blood. Its guns raked crippled vessels, not with the frantic fury of vengeance, but with clinical deliberate precision. One by one, the Ciliari ships that had fired on the Terran embassy were reduced to drifting carcasses. On Luna's surface, humanity watched the live feeds from the hidden bunkers. No cheer rose from the defense command, no cries of victory. Only the hush of grim, cathartic understanding. They had ended this war exactly as they had promised, without compromise, without hesitation. Admiral Chun lowered his head as the final Ciliari cruiser died in a blossom of ruptured hull and vacuum frozen corpses. He drew in a slow, steadying breath. "Status," he said. "All targets designated as combatants are destroyed or fleeing," reported his operations chief. "No further resistance." Chun nodded. "Transmit the final message to all channels." His aide keyed the broadcast. Across the flickering Dominion com grid, Chun's voice emerged from the static. "This is Earth's sole declaration. No more envoys will come, no more embassies. You have forfeited every treaty. You will never again dictate the terms of our survival. You returned our ambassador in pieces. Now you return to your masters as ashes. Let that stand as your monument to the folly of underestimating humanity." When the signal ended, the surviving Dominion ships accelerated away at maximum burn. They did not attempt to answer. They did not attempt to bargain. They fled. For long minutes, the system was silent. At last, Chun released a breath that felt like it had been held since the day Reyes' remains were returned in their sealed casket. He turned from the viewport and met the eyes of his command crew men and women, who had fought for years to make this day possible. "It's over," he said softly, but in his heart, he knew it was only the beginning. This battle would echo across the stars. The legend of the Dominion had been broken, and in its place, a darker legend had been born. Humanity's capacity to wage total war when cornered. Acheron's engines lit the void as it angled back toward Earth. It left the shattered fleet behind, drifting through clouds of glittering wreckage. The message was clear for any civilization watching. Earth had endured the threats, the insults, the murder of their envoy, and when provoked beyond reason, they had unleashed something that no empire could ever again afford to underestimate. Something not merely human, something unstoppable. The debris field drifted for days. Where once the Dominion fleet had shone in perfect formation, only twisted wreckage remained, blackened hulls tumbling through the dark, their shattered bulkheads catching the cold light of Sol. On the outer edges of the system, the surviving Celiari ships crept in broken convoys, each bearing scars deeper than any sensor array could catalog. Some had no engines left to engage their warp drives. Others had lost all communications. Their crews simply drifted, cradling their wounded and waiting for rescue that might never come. And in every mind aboard those ships, the same thought repeated, poisonous in its clarity. They had believed themselves unassailable. They had believed humanity was young, crude, and easily frightened into submission. Instead, they had discovered that humans remembered every slight and would repay cruelty tenfold. Far from the wreckage, in a Dominion War Council chamber orbiting the Celiari capital, High Speaker Arasul stood beneath a vault of holographic starfields. Dozens of warlords and fleet admirals gathered around, each casting furtive glances at the silent tactical projections. Not one of them could bear to speak first. It was Arasul himself, eldest of their ruling caste, who finally broke the hush. Have we received confirmation? An aide swallowed hard, mandibles clicking in distress. Yes, Speaker. The desolation of empires was destroyed with all hands. High Marshal Vikernes is gone. A tremor passed through the assembly. The Dominion had not lost a flagship in 5 centuries. Another warlord rasped in disbelief. How did they do it? How did primitives? Do not call them primitives, Arasul cut in. His voice held none of its usual grandeur. Only a raw, hollow exhaustion. Never again. He gestured to the hologram, where the wreckage of their fleet glimmered in silent accusation. They built weapons older than our civilization. They buried them beneath the lunar regolith while we congratulated ourselves on our clever treaties. They studied every facet of our empire until they knew precisely where to strike. And when provoked, his voice trailed off. When provoked, they had struck without hesitation, without remorse. The council room fell quiet again. At last, a junior admiral murmured, "Will they come for us? Will they press the attack to our own worlds?" That question hung in the air like the scent of blood. It was possible. Arasul could no longer pretend he knew the limits of humanity's resolve. He had watched entire planets broken for less cause than the murder of a beloved ambassador, but no fresh invasion came. No armada followed the Dominion survivors home. Instead, the humans transmitted only silence. And in that silence was a message far clearer than any threat. They did not need to come further. They had proven everything already. On Earth, the aftermath was no celebration. In the great assembly chambers of Geneva Station, the flags of every nation were draped in solemn black. A single hologram glowed above the central dais, a photograph of Ambassador Ilana Reyes smiling against the backdrop of the Terran embassy, taken on the day she departed for Celiari space. Rows of diplomats, soldiers, and civilians filled the chamber. Many wept quietly. Some simply sat in stunned quiet. Admiral Chun stood before them, his uniform scorched from the fires of Acheron's battle. His eyes were hollow, but his voice was steady. "Today," he said, "we have ended the Dominion's threat to our people. But make no mistake, this was never about victory. It was about dignity. About the simple truth that humanity will not be broken by fear." He paused, letting the silence speak for him. "They believed we were too young to remember the old lessons." He went on. "But we remembered. We remembered how to stand together. We remembered that no power, however ancient, has the right to dictate our worth." He lifted his head. "And we remembered that when all other options fail, when diplomacy is spat upon, there remains only one response: to show those who would conquer us what it means to earn our wrath." A hush fell over the chamber. No applause followed. It was not that kind of speech. It was a eulogy for Reyes and for the thousands of innocents who had paid the price of humanity's lesson to the stars. When the assembly adjourned, Chun walked alone to the observation deck. He stood before the viewport, gazing across the silver curve of Earth. Somewhere, far from this chamber, the first reports were already filtering through the interstellar networks. The Dominion was withdrawing its forces from contested worlds. Tributary civilizations were declaring independence. Other empires watched in uneasy silence, recalculating every assumption about the fragile species on the blue planet. A voice spoke softly at Chun's shoulder. "Do you think they will try again?" It was Ria's old chief of staff. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. Chun considered for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "Not soon. Not while they remember what happened here. And when they forget," she whispered. He turned to her, the barest hint of a smile flickering in his tired eyes. "Then we will remind them." Far above, in the dark between stars, the Dominion survivors carried their shame home. And in that final reckoning, the galaxy learned the truth. Humanity was not the weakest species. They were simply the last species you should ever provoke. Because when the smoke cleared and the dead were honored, there would always be a reckoning and a promise that echoed across the void. Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive. And when you break faith with them, there's no place left in the galaxy to hide.